Namaste, everyone. Today I will be leading you through a series, pretty much an all levels class, but its focus is on hip opening. Lots of us have tight hips, and there's various reasons for that. Sometimes it's an overuse, sometimes it's from stress. So when we're stressed out, we tend to curl into ourselves to protect ourselves. So our hips get tight from holding ourselves in like that. Sometimes when we do a lot of activity, that activity involves lifting our legs. So we walk, we run, we ride bikes, sometimes we do classes, and it involves using those muscles a lot, and we don't stretch them out so they get tight. We may have injured ourselves. It could be a result of maybe some alignment issues within our body, so it might not be from the hips at all. It could be from our feet. Or it might be the muscles surrounding the actual hips and not the hips themselves. So, there's this whole group of muscles in here. Maybe it's the glutes, maybe it's the adductors, maybe the abductors. There's so much that could be going on, but a very common complaint I get in yoga classes is tight hips. And I often have people ask when I say, hey, what do you want to do in class? A lot of people say, hips, please, can we open our hips? So we're going to focus on that today. Do what you can. As always, I recommend that if you do have issues with your hips, you seek medical advice before doing a class this intense for the hips. Some of it will be releasing the hips, some of it will be strengthening the hips, and we're going to use some props during the class. Just one more piece of advice, though, as that part of that disclaimer, that if you do have hip issues that require surgery in the future, or you've had hip surgery or hip replacement, I do recommend that you do not do this class. I have other all levels classes, beginner classes. You can try those ones instead. They're a little more hip friendly. If you're looking to do some of the poses with the props, again, you don't have to, but there's a purpose this time to it. So I do recommend having blocks or something you can lift yourself up with. If you have a bolster or something, we are going to be resting on the blocks so that we can get some release in the hips. If you want, you can have a blanket nearby, especially if you're staying in Shavasana at the end of class. You might want to be warm and put that blanket on top of you, or use it to support your head or your knees, and I'll talk about that when we get there. A lot of times, too, we have back problems because our hips are tight. So you'll find, or you might find, that as you do this, or you release the hips more often, that your back might start to feel better. And that's because, like I said, we do a lot of activity that pull the hips forward, so those muscles start to shorten, and it pulls on the low back, and that's oftentimes why we get back pain. So it's good to keep our hips open. We don't want to have hips that are too open, though. I know, there's all these rules, right? But for the most part, most of us are tight in the hips. So enjoy this flow, do what you can, use modifications as necessary, take breaks, build up to the whole thing, and have fun. So we're gonna start this time with our feet wide on our mat. And just take a moment to kind of settle in. Spread your toes. You wanna make sure that you're wide enough in the legs that as you sink down, your knees aren't pushing past the toe line. So you'll see my knees are about over top of my ankles. So you want to be right there. You want to be grounded. So remember, that's the foundation. We want to have nice support where we're connected to the earth. And then just take a few breaths. Inhale, exhale, let the shoulders come down. A few rolls. Maybe you shake. Maybe you move those hips a little bit. Whatever feels good to you. And then just kind of settle into it. Create space. So find space between the ribs, right up through to the crown of your head. Find your breath. Arms are a little bit strong here. So we have dynamic tension right through the tips of the fingers. Notice how you feel in this space. Notice your breath. So breathing in through nose, out through nose if you can. Mostly just breathe. And then when you're ready, inhale, we're going to sweep the arms up. Exhale, just bring them down, and we're just getting used to moving with our breath. So inhale up, exhale down. And then whenever you're ready, we start to add the lower body. So we bend the knees, we sweep the arms. So we're coming through our sunflower flow here. Checking in, so we want to brace our belly to protect our back. So that's that sensation of doing up a zipper from our navel to our ribs, kind of like we're wearing tight pants. So starting to warm up the muscles that we're going to use to help open up those hips. And just flowing with your breath. So we're warming the body to get ready for movement. Just a small change next time, changing to moonflower. So we're a little stronger in the upper body. Pulling the arms down, get a little squeeze in the back body, checking in with that belly brace. opening chest, nice and long in the neck. Checking in with our legs again. See, there's so much to think about. It makes you mindful in all your movement. Once you get it, though, you just focus on the breath and the movement. Let's finish out one more. And then we're going to meet down. So arms can be open, as in our goddess pose, or we can bring palms to heart center if we're taking care of our shoulders today. Maybe even a little pressure between the hands to activate upper body. Your choice. And then maybe scooching the feet. I like mine a little bit wider as I start to glide side to side. And then we can release the arms down here so we can keep them down, we can keep them at heart center, or maybe we just start to find a little flow with the arms. And again, just moving with our breath. Finding mindful movement in that flow. Letting the body just warm. Get used to moving and breathing. Get used to thinking about it. And let's finish off. One more to each side. Come back to the center. Sink, hands on our thighs. Draw shoulders down. Create some space. There's a little bit of a tuck here, so we're holding the back, protecting our spine. Let's take a big inhale, and then exhale, push all the way up. And let's find the top of our mat. And I want you to have, if you're using blocks or if we're really tight in the hips, have blocks or a block close by. So let's find mountain pose at the top of our mat. Check in, spread toes, ground yourself, strong legs, belly's braced. Create space in the upper body. Let's inhale, bring the arms up, palms come together, bring them to heart center. Let's find our chair. And just take a little pause here. So the hips here are going down and back. We want to make sure we're not pushing knees forward, but it's like we're sitting in a chair. So we're putting a little bit of pressure on the back here because we're tipping from the hips. So you really want to get that sensation of doing up your zipper here. Let's just pause for another breath, maybe two. And then with your next exhale, we're going to fold. So the hands can come to the thighs, they can come to the shins, or we can just kind of hang out here. Knees bent at least a little bit. We can release the head, shake, nod. And we're going to go through some slow sun salutations. So we're going to dig into the lunge variations a little bit. So we're going to soften the knees, fingertips come down, right leg steps back, release knee and top of the foot. And we're coming down to that low lunge. For safety, we want this knee over top of the ankle. We want that heel on the floor. So if you find some people end up like this in a lunge, pick up your foot. You can pick up your own body and move it anywhere on your mat that you want. That's your safe place. And bring it so that we have that nice alignment. We're stacking the joints. And we're going to brace. We're going to draw that belly in. And we're going to start to lower the hips. So if our hips are really tight, it's going to hurt where we're connected to our body and that back leg. So if it's too much, pick up the knee and move it in a little bit. If you want a deeper stretch, feel free to take that knee back. Now, if we find we have a hard time reaching the floor, this is where you can use one or maybe even both blocks turned various directions to give you that little bit of lift, because we want space to be able to breathe. And then just focus here on breath. So inhale, we want to find length in the spine, and then perhaps exhale, we sink in that hip a little more. So let's focus on that. Let's take a few more breaths. Inhale, exhale. Inhale and exhale. One more time here. And then with our blocks or our hands, we're just going to move them back slightly and just start to shift forward and back. So in that front leg, the toes can come off the floor. Maybe we keep them on the floor. Maybe they're partway on the floor. And just get a little bit of a flow. And as we slide back, we take pressure off the hip. We feel a little more stretch in the back, the front leg. Let's do one more. Coming back to that lunge. And then just take a breath or two here. So again, creating that space, drawing shoulders down, whether hands are on the floor or they're on our blocks. One more breath. And then if we have blocks, let's just move them out of the way. Find the floor, curl toes, exhale to down dog. So give that hip a break. Spread fingers, push against the floor, long back. Bend the knees if you need to, pressing heels down, elbows soft. Take a few breaths here. We're bringing ribs towards our thighs. And then we should be feeling length in the back. Tipping our tailbone up to the sky. Let's take one more breath here. And then we're going to come to the knees and find resting pose. So we sink back towards the heels. Arms can be outstretched out front, or we can stack the fists or the hands to rest the forehead on. Maybe we take the knees a bit wider. We can rock a little bit. So again, we're giving the hips a little bit of a break here. Feel the breath in the back body. And then send the arms out nice and long. Pick up the head, shift forward. Come through kneeling plank, tuck those elbows in, lower all the way down. Keeping it nice and simple, a Sphinx. So elbows just outside of shoulders, we find length in the back, and then we lift. Breathe. So just gazing forward. Neck is long, but not lifting the chin too much. Draw shoulders down. Maybe press the tops of the feet down and see if you can get a little more space. Maybe yes, maybe no. And then inhale, release, slide hands under shoulders, curl toes, exhale to down dog. A breath or two here. And then we're going to set up side two for that lunge. So we're going to pick up the right leg, sweep it through, bring it up to the top of the mat, pick your foot up, move it around if you have to. Release back knee, top of the foot, and make sure this knee is safe over top of the ankle or slightly behind it, just not pushing past the toes and this heel is on the floor. So we brace, we find length so we're not pushing through the belly, and then we're sinking in the hips instead. And just gazing forward, drawing shoulders down, taking a few breaths here. So remember, you can adjust that back knee depending on how tight your hips are. Inhale, we find length. Exhale, we sink. So we keep trying to move with our breath. See if we can find a little release as we exhale. Let's find one more breath here. You might notice one side different than the other. And then finding that little flow. So we bring the hands back just a little bit. We shift, come forward and back a few times. So giving that hip a little bit of a break. Maybe feeling that stretch in the back of the front leg as we go back. Do one more there and back. Come back to that lunge. And again, pause for just a few breaths. Use the exhale to find a little more movement, maybe a little more space. And then if we have blocks, moving them out of the way, fingertips come down. Let's find down dog as we exhale. Pause there. Give your hips a break. Maybe we walk our dog a little bit. That feels good to us in this moment. You can take resting pose. We have 2 or 3 more breaths here, so your choice, wherever you want to be. And then taking our gaze forward, picking up the left leg, sweeping it through, getting it up to the top of our mat, making sure we're stacking those joints to keep that knee safe. Release back knee, top of the foot again. Drop that hip down. So you can stay here where we were before. You can add those blocks, or you can come up. So again, we're bracing so we're not pushing the belly. We're sinking down in the hips, protecting the back here. Now, you can stay in either of those 2 places that we've already visited, or you can increase the length of the lever in the top body, the upper body, by lifting the arms, or you can make it a crescent lunge, interlace the fingers, send the fingers up, and then start to open up and just feel that hip lengthen a little bit more. If that's too much, come back to where we were before. If we can, take 2, maybe 3 breaths where we are, using the exhale if we can to sink just a little bit in that hip. One more breath. And then we're going to come all the way forward. forward. Left hand on the knee, right hand on the floor on our block. Use the exhale, we're gonna twist towards that left leg. And then just take a couple breaths here. So just a little bit of rotation. And then with the next exhale, come back to center, curl toes, spine down dog. Whew. Take a breath or two there. And then we're gonna do side two. So we take our gaze forward, pick up the right leg, sweep it through, find that lunge, find our brace, release. So again, you can stay down here, hands can come to the blocks. You can come up, bracing, sinking through the hip. Draw shoulders down. Find your breath. We can add arms lifted or interlace, extending index finger and opening up. So as you do that, you're lengthening that hip, the muscles there, so that we get a deeper stretch. If that's too much, again, you come here, maybe you come back here, maybe you even come back down here. Okay, if you really need a break, you can come back to that little flow and then come back to it. Wherever you are, let's take one more breath because that's enough. And then come back down, right hand on the thigh, other hand on the floor of your block. Exhale, we twist. So in our twist here, we want to keep that nice alignment. So we want to make sure that the big toe stays on the floor. Don't worry, we'll get to picking it up. One more breath here. And then we come back to the center, curl toes, spine down dog. A little break for those hips. Again, you can walk it a little bit. Shake it out if you need to. Whew. And then let's take our gaze forward. Left leg sweeps up and through. Release knee. So this time, we're going to bring the hands to the inside. And now we're going to pick up the big toe. So we're going to rock to the pinky toe edge of our foot and open up the hip. So in the event you've never done this with me before, I'm going to turn just to face the camera to show you. All right, so hands are on the inside of that knee. We just turn and open that hip. Okay? Breathe there. I'm going to come back to side. Now, if our hips are okay with us doing this, and you can use a block to put your forearms on, but maybe we come to one forearm, maybe we come to both, and again, maybe you add the block to make the floor a little closer to you, to take some of the pressure off, and maybe we stay right up here, or maybe we just bend the elbows a little bit. So listen to your body, listen to your hips, they're gonna tell you. Let's take another breath here. And then start to lift the knee back up, all the toes on the floor, separate the hands, find down dog, that little bit of a break, maybe walk your dog. And then again, we change sides. So picking up right leg, sweeping it through, setting up that lunge, bracing, sinking that hip, hands come to the inside. And then when we're ready, we start to open the knee up, pick up the big toe, roll, breathe. And again, we can add our options. So maybe we soften elbows, maybe we bring one forearm down, maybe both. Maybe we find a block to give us a little lift so the floor and our arms meet kind of halfway. And just breathe here. So breathe into that hip. So notice the sensation that you're feeling and just breathe into that. Don't judge it. Just be like, oh, yeah, that hip is tight. Maybe I should take more care of it. And then just breathe into it. And if you have to pull back a little bit, that's just showing your body a bit of love. You listen to your body. Wherever you are in that, take one more breath. Let's make our way back up. Bring the knee back in, toes on the floor, separate hands. Let's find down dog. Pause there. Get a nice stretch. And then spread fingers, shift forward, come through plank. You can come to the knees for kneeling plank. Tuck the elbows, lower all the way down. You can come to that Sphinx we did before, or lengthen, find a small or large cobra. Elbows are soft. Draw shoulders down, come out of the shoulder girdle. Neck is long. Maybe press down the tops of the feet to see if you get a little more space opening up there. And then let's release, push to down dog. All right, one more series of lunges, I promise. Let's take our gaze forward, left leg sweeps up and through, but this time we're gonna come up to a high lunge. So feet hip distance, we come all the way up. Okay, make adjustments for stability, and then start to sink a little bit in the knees. Adjust clothing. Palms can be at heart. We can send the arms up. Breathe here. And then what I'm going to get you to do is that back leg. So lots of times I have you bend it. We do lunges and stuff. This time I want you to push through the heel and feel some lengthening in that hip. So this leg becomes long. Breathe. I'm just going to bring my arms down just because it's easier to see you guys. So we can add a little bit more. Remember we added that crescent lunge when the knee was down. You can take the arms up, find length, and then open up. Create some space. And then maybe sink. So pressing through the heel of the back leg, we're still lengthening, but we're just getting lower so we get a bigger stretch. Pressing through the feet for stability. Come back up tall. Find the floor. Find down dog. Whew. Stretch it out. Walk the dog if you need to. And then we're going to do side two. So we take our gaze forward, pick up right, sweep it through, find your high lunge, ground yourself, find stability, brace, start to sink. So notice the back knee starts maybe a little bit bent. Once we're ready, we're grounded, press through the heel and lengthen that leg. And then sink. Breathe. Arms can be up. If we need a little more stability, arms can even be out. So just noticing that hip, noticing the feet, noticing the strength. If we're ready, adding that lengthening and then opening. Let the breath flow. Just notice sensations, don't judge them. Good, one more breath. And then come back up tall. Find the top of your mat, find down dog. Spread your fingers, shift forward to plank, knees or toes, tuck, lower all the way down. Find length, find your back bend. Breathe. Elbows soft if you're all the way up. Let the face soften, the jaw softens, but the neck is long. This time, let's release and exhale to resting pose all the way back. Maybe take the knees wider, and again, maybe stack the hands, maybe rock a bit. So you guys just stay there for a few breaths and listen to my voice. Now, we're gonna come into pigeon pose. Pigeon can be challenging for a lot of people, so you might wanna use props. And if it's really challenging for you, you can skip it altogether if you like, and go to another pose that feels good to you. So pigeon pose, you can use a blanket and maybe roll it up a few times so you can rest your hip on it. Or you can use a block. Blanket's just a little softer, it feels better. You can also use the block at the front of your mat to rest your hands on. So again, the earth and our body kind of meet halfway. So we're gonna start in down dog. Let's make our way there. And we're gonna pick up our left leg. We're gonna scooch it underneath us so that the knee comes up to our wrist, and we're gonna let the shin come down to the floor and then scooch the other leg back. And right there might be enough for you, okay? Now, there's lots of variations here. If that's even too much for you and you want that little bit of support, grab that blanket, tuck it under your hip or your butt cheek so that it holds your hips square. So what we want to avoid is dropping that hip down, so now my back is torqued a little bit. So we want to keep the hips square. So if I were to feel those two bones in my hips that are kind of like headlights, they're both facing the floor. Now to make this more challenging, we just start to bring this foot out until it becomes more parallel to the top of our mat. And we don't go any further out than that, the parallel position. Most of us can't even get there if our hips are that tight. So we come here, and again, hips are square. We want to make sure we're not dumping and torquing the back. And we want to find length. All right, check the back foot. So we want to make sure that the ankle's not cycling. We want to make sure that it's nice and long here. And then draw shoulders down. So this is pigeon pose. Okay, get this pose first. You'll hear me talk about that in class, and we want to start to decrease this space between us and the floor. That's when our hip releases, we're able to sink a little bit more. All right, this is maybe where we use a block, so we have a little bit of height here. Breathe. Now, a lot of people go right away to sleeping pigeon, which is when you fold, which if you're a seasoned yogi is fine if you know what you're doing. But if we don't know what we're doing or we're not listening to our body, we can hurt ourselves by getting into that right away. So I like people to spend a few breaths here and kind of get used to this positioning, because when we fold, always on an exhale, right? Hands can come to our block, but we again want to keep those hips square here. And we still want to keep moving. We still want to keep decreasing that space between us and the floor. Draw shoulders down. And as the hip loosens a little bit, maybe we get lower. Maybe we're able to rest our head, our forehead on our hands. And maybe not. And maybe we stay all the way up. We don't even come to sleeping pigeon. So let's take another breath, maybe two here, because I've held you here for a fairly long time, especially if your hips are tight. Now, this is one of those poses that if you're totally into this right now, you can pause and just hang out here as long as you want. Set a timer if you want even, and then start the video again, switch sides, make sure you do the same length on each side, and then just continue on. For now, we're gonna lift ourselves up. However we can get to down dog. There we go. Oof, add movement, shake it out, whatever you need to do, a quick resting pose if you need it. Find some length, find your breath, get some oxygen going. Send it to your hips. And then we're just going to do the exact same thing on side two. So whenever you're ready, picking up the right leg, sweeping underneath, start with the knee coming up to your wrist, drop the shin down, slide back, and then adjust accordingly. And you might get to a different place on each side. And that's where we acknowledge that our hips are tighter on one side than the other. Typically, because we're dominant-handed, right? We carry our purses on the same side. We play sports, throwing on the same side all the time. There's various reasons. Maybe we've had an injury. So again, we just want to check that ankle back there, and we start to work the hips. So remember, we find that brace to protect our back. We're not pushing the belly out here. Draw shoulders down. Find kind of your sweet spot for now where you know you can get a little bit more as you breathe, but it's not painful, right? We're not taking it past the edge. And then whenever you're ready, if you want to add the sleeping pigeon, again, we brace, we maintain the square hips, and on an exhale, we start to fold. Draw shoulders down, neck is long. Just letting the breath flow. So again, acknowledging what we're feeling right now, just going, so that's how that feels on this side. And just noting it so that you know how to care and love for your hips going forward. When we pay attention to how we feel in certain poses, we're able to notice those little nuances when we do other poses or other activities. So maybe we notice the habits that we've formed that are causing some of that, the issues that we're having, or some of that misalignment, or we're not symmetrical in things that we do. And we're never going to be perfect. We're never going to fix it completely. But if we have that knowledge, if we're mindful of it, we can maybe help with some of those issues that we have. Let's finish a breath here. And then come all the way up. Find down dog, however you can get there. Take a few breaths, shake stuff out. Breathe, breathe, breathe. And then we're going to kind of walk our hands and feet towards each other so we fold. Feet hip distance, knees bent, at least a little bit. Slide up, come to flat back. Arms can be by our side, that's a version of airplane. Bend the knees, palms come to heart, let's find a chair. And then exhale, let's stand. So let's take the feet wide on our mat again, and we're just going to come back to a few of those sunflowers. And I just want you to compare how you feel versus the very beginning of class. We're not going to stand here for a long time. So we're just going to inhale, sweep up, and exhale, come down. So just notice if you feel a little more open, a little looseness. Maybe you feel no change at all. Maybe you didn't pay attention the first time, so you know the next time you do this video to pay attention. And let's just do one more. Meet reaching up tall, 5-pointed star, get a nice stretch. Knees are soft, elbows are soft. And then float the arms down, walk the feet in so we're hip distance apart. So a little bit of balance, which challenges our core, but we're gonna open the hips while we do it. Now, I'm gonna give you the option to fold in this pose, in which case you might wanna block either to catch your head as you fall or to bring the ground up a little bit closer to you. So again, feet hip distance apart, hands wherever you like. I like to start with mine on my hips. So we're gonna shift our weight to one foot, doesn't matter which, because we're doing both sides separately. Pick up one foot, and as always with balancing poses, maybe we just stand here or we have a light touch on the floor. But for today, we're gonna bring the ankle on the knee, let this knee open up, so it's that standing pigeon, and then bring palms to heart center if you can. Brace, and then start to send the hips back like you're sitting in a chair. So maybe that's as far as you go today. You can stay here and send the arms up, so we increase the length of the lever, you get more core working there. Or if you want a little more stretch for the hips, you sink a little bit lower, and maybe you even tip forward and find that block or find the floor. So that's your choice here. So just by adding that bend, we're just putting a little more on that hip to kind of stretch it, kind of like we just did in Pigeon Pose. And I'm gonna bring that block back in because my hip's telling me to do that. And one more breath if you folded. And then this is the tricky part. If you folded, brace, come back up to the chair in your pigeon. Oof. And then let's all stand and release. Shake out that supporting ankle if you need to, maybe the other hip. So we're gonna do the same thing on side two. Know that you might not get to the same place on each side. Again, we just acknowledge, we don't judge. We just go, huh, interesting. So side two, ground yourself, prep. As always, maybe you stay here. Otherwise, we cross, we open. I like to use my hand to help with that. Palms come to heart if we can. Draw shoulders down. You can stay tall here or add that chair. You can extend the arms and focus more on the core, standing tall, or you can focus more on the hip and sink and maybe fold here. And again, we can use the block. Remember, it has 3 different ways to make it taller. Or you can find the floor. Please breathe. So if we folded, let's finish one more breath. And again, the hardest part, I think anyway, brace, take your time, come back up, to the chair. Did I recover? I recovered. Almost, and stand. All right, so let's keep the block close to us. We are gonna use it when we get down onto our back. For now, let's just find the top of our mat again. Mountain pose, take a breath, check in, notice your hips. See if you feel a little looser, a little longer, a little more open. And then sweep up, palms come together, make their way to heart as we lower the hips, find our chair. Use your next exhale to fold. We can release head and neck here. Maybe take a sigh as we exhale. And then soften the knees, fingertips come down. Let's walk back to down dog. And then just take a few breaths here. I love exhaling through the mouth. It's like a big sigh. My whole body just relaxes. Probably doesn't sound great in a mic. And then we're gonna come to our knees. So we're gonna come to camel. And if we do have any issues with our knees or if it's uncomfortable on the floor, we can take our mat and maybe roll it, double roll it like that so we have some padding. Otherwise, you can use a blanket and just have that little bit of cushioning for your knees. So I'm just gonna use the blanket today. So if we've rolled up our mat or we're using the blanket, let's just place our knees on it, maybe even our shins. And then we're gonna come up onto our knees. So again, we stack the joints, knees underneath those hips. You can have the feet flat here, or you can curl the toes, your choice. We're not gonna go into a full camel today. That's not the intention of this class. I just want you to get a little bit of release in the hips. So I'm gonna have my feet flat, I just find it more stable. And then we wanna do that zipper up. We can make hands into fists or put them flat on our back and create some space. So inhale, we're gonna scooch up, almost like there's a string pulling us up at the top of the head. And then exhale, start to open up. And then use the breath. Inhale, find length. Exhale, open. So we're not pushing on the hips, they're just resting there, whether the hands are flat or we have hips. Find length, inhale, exhale, open. So we're using a little more posterior chain here. It's a back bend. And as a result, we're finding opening and length. We're giving those hips a bit of a break. So again, just keep breathing into it, creating space, not pushing on the hips, letting them open up organically. One more breath, a little more movement, and then come all the way up. Sink back, take a breath. And then we're gonna come and sit. We're gonna scooch and sit on our butt. Now, if we do have really tight hips, you can use a blanket to sit on. It's gonna lift your hips up to take some of the pressure off. And we're gonna come to our feet touching each other and about the distance of our foot away from our body. Increase length, find your breath, brace, and you can stay right here. Now, if our hips are really tight, you might want to put a block under each knee to give you that support so they're not kind of suspended in midair. Otherwise, we find length, and maybe we draw the ankles in a little bit more and find a little more openness. Create space on the inhale, and then exhale, we can start to fold and maybe just use our forearms or our elbows just to gently press the knees a little bit. And breathe here. So use one more exhale to find movement, space, and then make your way up if you folded. So we're gonna come to what's called fire log or double pigeon pose. If your hips are really tight, this may not be accessible to you. So you can stick with an easy seated pose, because if your hips are that tight, that's gonna be challenging for you. You can do crisscross applesauce, you can do a half lotus if that's accessible to you, or you can separate the feet and just to kind of line them up so that both hips are snugged in and nicely lined up, all right? For our fire log or double pigeon, we have one foot in front of us, so the shin is pretty much parallel to what would be the edge of our mat, and then we flex that foot. Then we take the other leg and we bring it on top so that the ankle crosses over the knee, just like we did in that standing pigeon, so that this knee would start to come down where this ankle was. Okay, so that's the double fire log right there. Breathe. So the more space we have here, the tighter our hips are. So inhale, create space, and then exhale. I like to just gently use my hand. Don't force it. Listen to your body. But with that exhale, a millimeter. It's all you need, right? Think about one of my instructors. I love her analogy. She says, when you have a raspberry seed in your teeth, how annoying that is, how painful it can be, how much you notice it. And when it comes out, you're like, I have so much space there now. That's all you need is a raspberry seed, right? A millimeter. So keep breathing through it. Maybe keep finding some openness. Allow yourself to come out of this whenever you need to. Come back to that cobbler's pose with the feet together or just an easy crisscross applesauce. For now, 2 more breaths. And then we're just going to release and change sides. So the other leg goes on the bottom, other leg comes up top. You might notice a difference. I'm sure you see the difference on my side that I have less space here, so my hips are different on each side. And then just breathe. So remember, inhale, create, exhale, move. Just moving with your breath. Really, don't get hung up on it. Continue to breathe in any activity that you're doing, but there is some science behind when you should exhale sometimes in movement. And exhale is typically when you're moving through a harder part or you need your breath for a bit of assistance, but naturally your body will know what it wants to do. So just listen to your body. Just a few more breaths here. Last breath here. And then release. Take the legs wide, hands beside you, and a nice little rock side to side to release those hips. You can even hold maybe for a little bit of one side and then change sides, or just keep the fluidity. And then we're going to lie down on our back with our knees bent. And I typically don't recommend having the blanket under your head at this point, just because it can impinge the neck with what we're doing. But you might, well, I recommend that you have a block close by, but again, not necessary. So knees are bent. You can use one knee to roll yourself down safely. Find a few breaths here. So this is constructive rest. And if you need to come out of any pose, this is where you go. You can always add that windshield wipe. You'll notice I've added my blocks to each side of me. And that's just so I can show the reclined version of our cobbler's pose or bound ankle pose. So let's come back up to center, bottoms of the feet come together, let the knees open up. And again, if we're really tight in the hips, you might want a block on each side, and maybe you even turn it different directions to give you that lift, to take the pressure off. So that's up to you. Breathe here. Arms can be anywhere we like, so we can just rest them on the body. Maybe we rest them on our hips and just notice, maybe send some love and light there. If we want to stretch a little bit more in the upper body, the arms can go wide, or we can do goalpost arms. Let's press the feet together as we inhale, and then exhale. See if we can get a little release. Let's do that 2 more times. Inhale, press the feet together. Exhale, release. 1 more time. Press the feet, push, push, and then release. Good job. Stop squeezing your glutes. 1 more natural breath here. And then we're going to start to lift up the legs, bottoms of the feet come to the floor, hands by our side. We're going to come into a bridge pose, but then we're going to support this bridge so that our hips get a break. So we want to just touch where our ankles are, so we know that our ankles are about, or where our heels are, sorry, so we know where our ankles are underneath our knees. Feet about hip distance apart. So this is where the block comes in. So we're going to take a nice big inhale. Exhale, we're going to push with the feet. We're going to lift ourselves up, and then we're going to pop that block underneath us, kind of where the tailbone is, around where the hip line is, so that we're supported, and then bring our arms down. So spread the toes, both feet pressing down here, and just resting against the block. So what we're doing is giving the hips here a rest. We just work them a lot. So let's give them a little bit of love. You can use a rolled up blanket here to give you lift. You can use a bolster, something that's just not going to move on you. Let the breath just flow. The chest is rolling a little bit towards the chin. You're finding some space in the ribs in the front body. And then notice what happens if you start to move your tailbone. And you might have to adjust the block here like I'm doing right now. Maybe we just curl the tailbone so it comes over top of the block a little bit, and then tip it back. So a little bit of pelvic tilting here. And just notice, it's not a big movement. Just a small movement to explore how that feels. If it's not comfortable, don't do it. You can stay in that supported bridge. If we did add that movement, let's just move it through 1 more time. And then pause in a neutral position. Let's use our next exhale to push, lift ourselves up, take that block out. Lower down. Bottoms of the feet come back together. Open up. Just notice if you feel any difference here. Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe for a few breaths we press the feet together and then release. Let's do 1 more. Take a few breaths, just breathing naturally, letting the legs open organically. Finishing a breath here. We'll start to lift the knees, hug them into our chest. So again, giving the hips a break, and maybe we rock side to side. Maybe we do some circles a few times in each direction. And then keeping the right knee in, send the left leg out nice and long, flexing that foot. And with each exhale, draw the right knee in a little bit. So we're just taking pressure off that hip. The other hip is stretching a little bit. Now you can stay right here, you can explore, you can hold on to that knee and just take it out to the side a little bit. Jaw is soft, the muscles in the face are soft here as we just breathe. And then bring it back up, hug it back in, and change sides. Just noticing again if one side feels different than the other. It may or may not. Maybe we open the hip up to the side. I like to put my hand actually on this hip so I make sure that it's not lifting. We want to keep it down. Come back to the center, hug that knee back in again. And then one more time, bottoms of the feet on the floor, feet hip distance, find that bridge, find your block. It's a supported bridge to give the hips a break. Exhale to push and lift. Put the block in there, let it support you, and breathe. So let's take 3 or 4 big breaths here, inhaling, exhaling through nose or mouth. Let yourself be completely supported by that block so that your hips aren't working at all. Your feet are on the floor, but we're not pressing down, we're just letting them be grounded. One more breath. And then use an exhale again to push, pull that block out, hug both knees in. Maybe we rock, maybe we do some circles, whatever feels good to you. And then we're gonna make our way to Shavasana. So traditionally, arms and legs are out long. We can keep the knees bent if we like that constructive rest. If we have low back issues, we can walk the feet wide to the edges of our mat and let the knees rest against each other or put that block in between so they have something to rest against. If you plan to stay here for a while, this is where you can grab your blanket. You can maybe put a blanket underneath your head. You can put one underneath your knees too if we find that we have low back issues. And then just let the legs open. I like to shake a little bit here so everything kind of just settles in. Let the shoulder blades come down a bit. Let the fingers just curl naturally. Palms facing up. And then find your breath. So this is where we want to start to use the breath to help us just kind of melt into the floor. So we inhale, and then exhale, find release. Let yourself sink. And as you breathe here, start to notice. Maybe do a scan from the head to the fingertips, to the hips, to the toe tips, and see if you're holding anywhere. See if you can let go a little bit more anywhere. And then use the exhale to assist you in doing that. Maybe we start to make the exhale a little bit longer than the inhale. It's a sign to our brain that we're trying to relax. And you can spend as much time here as you like, especially if you're not getting a lot of rest these days. It's going to be very restful. It can almost make up for some sleep that you're missing out on maybe. But for now, just for our purposes in this moment, bend the knees. Like I said, you can pause the video and stay there. But for now, we're just going to bend the knees. Come onto one side, rest the head on your arm. Other arm can be on our hip or on the floor in front of us. Again, you can spend as much time here as you like, but otherwise, for now, we're going to use the hand to push and roll ourselves up to a seated position, whatever that is in this moment. Take a moment, draw shoulders down. Let's inhale, sweep arms up. Bring palms together. Let them come to heart center. And let's just take a moment to acknowledge our hips and all that they do for us, the emotions that they hold inside. Now, sometimes when we do a lot of hip opening, it can release negative emotions or emotions, period. So if you do find that in the next 48 hours that you cry for some reason, that could be why. And it's not something to make fun of. It's part of our processing. It's part of letting go. And trauma-sensitive yoga, releasing the hips, helps to let go of stuff that we're holding inside us. So just know that that's a normal reaction sometimes to deep hip opening. But for now, let's say thank you, hips. Send them your love. And the light and love in me shines the light and love in each and every one of you. Thank you for practicing with me today. As always, if you have questions, you can email me. You can find me on Facebook. You can find my webpage. For now, take care of yourself and each other. Stay safe. Namaste.